Seems a really strange thing to say, but the time in your career where you're thinking about your retirement that will be the most beneficial and make the biggest impact is in your 20s. And that's a really simple reason for why that is. It's that the money that you save at the beginning of your career when you're first thinking about retirement actually has the longest time to remain invested and therefore grow. So what that means is that the money you save right at the beginning of your career will be the bit that contributes the most to your final retirement pot. If I was to give you a simple example of that, if we think of a young dentist, let's say they're 25, and let's imagine that they were putting £5,000 into a pension plan. And if we assume they want to retire at 65, and I make some pretty conservative assumptions about investment returns that aren't crazily optimistic, by the time that dentist reaches 65, the £5,000 they put in when they were 25 is going to be worth £35,200. If we jump forward and say, let's say that 25-year-old dentist doesn't do that and instead at 45 thinks, actually now's my time and I'm going to do this. I wish I'd done this 20 years ago, but here we go. Puts the same £5,000 away. We've got the same investment returns, the same point of access at 65. In that scenario, the £5,000 has only grown to £13,266 by the time they're 65. So, to put it really simply, the earlier you begin, the less it's going to cost you to fund a good standard of retirement. So that would be top tip number one. Top tip number two is understand your NHS pension benefits. I feel like at Wesleyan we're the biggest and noisiest advocate for how brilliant the NHS pension scheme is and what a fantastic bedrock it is to any dentist's financial planning. And that's because it's a pension and also some wider benefits that sit behind that. Unfortunately, as financial advisors, it's all too common for us to talk to dentists about the NHS pension and the wider benefit package and find that the dentist just doesn't understand the value of what they're getting. So why is that important? Well, in dentistry today, we're seeing more and more young dentists not even join the NHS pension scheme. And a lot of those that did have started to either decrease their NHS workload or move away from it entirely. The message here, therefore, is to kind of say, look, regardless of where you are, whether you are or whether you aren't completing UDAs, UOAs, any kind of NHS work whatsoever, the benefits you built at some point in your career will be hugely valuable for your future retirement. And unfortunately, we've just been through an era that many dentists will know the name of, but not necessarily understand, called the McLeod remedy. And that has made understanding your NHS pension benefits more complex than ever before. So the point of this top tip would just be a call to action to dentists to go and get from the NHS pension scheme, or if you're in Scotland, the SPPA, a copy of your pension statement showing what benefits you've built so far, in what schemes, and go and get some specialist financial advice from someone who can project that forward for you and show you what that's actually going to be worth in real terms at the point that you'd like to retire. It's been really, really rare for me during my career to meet a dentist who's had limited choices in the retirement because they haven't saved enough. But in every scenario where I have, it's always been because they've left things too late. So I just go back to top tip number one and say, start the earliest as you possibly can do, but make sure you do it from a position of being as informed as you can do as well. Top tip number three is don't fall into the tax trap. The UK tax system is one that is absolutely full of different tax traps, and effectively what tax traps mean is they give you also lots of opportunities. So a smart dentist who's on top of what they're earning and on top of their opportunities, looking at their situation, if we just go for one example really quickly, someone earning £125,140 is actually going to be paying a tax rate of 60%. And that's because as soon as you earn more than £100,000, you lose something called your personal allowance at a rate of 2 for 1. So the effective implication of earning £125,140 is that you pay £15,048 on that bit between £100,000 and £125,140. Now, lots of smart dentists with good proactive financial advisors will look at putting that extra £25,000 above the 100 into a pension to get that 60% tax relief. And this is really, really relative to Scotland, where there's so many different tax bands and tax rates. So it's just to say, be smart with your tax position. Start to think before the end of the tax year and look at any traps and problems that you might have by falling into higher bands as opportunities to plan for your retirement at a cheaper rate than you would otherwise have got. Number 4 is a strange one. It's protect your retirement. So we're not actually talking about planning for retirement in any way, shape or form. We're actually looking at making sure that you're in a decent position if something happens to you that actually stops you being able to work all the way up to your retirement age. So for many dentists in the 50s, they've spent the whole career with the 1995 NHS pension scheme and the knowledge that their retirement age was 60. But for anyone younger than that, they've been through the McLeod era and they're looking at an NHS pension and also a state pension regime that's now looking at a normal retirement age of 68 for them. Now, those older dentists who always had a retirement age of 60 have typically bought income protection throughout their career that takes them to 60. And what we're not seeing from young dentists is them change their mindset and say, I know that my pension is not going to come into its fullest until I'm 68, and therefore I'll protect myself until I'm 68. We're still seeing them look at income protection and the wider protection available to themselves and view it from a budget perspective. And we totally understand why they would do that, because things are tight, certainly are. There's so many costs on a young person nowadays. But what we want everybody to think about when they're thinking about their retirement is think, what if something happens to me next week? What if I actually don't get the chance to put all those pension contributions away and get myself to a situation whereby I'm definitely going to have enough at 68? And that's what I mean by protect your retirement. So the last tip is get organised. And really simply, that's to say, I've seen a recent article published for the financial advisor website called Unbiased, and it was saying that there's 1.6 million lost pension plans in the UK with a total wealth of £19.4 billion. That's a huge amount of money that has been lost purely because somebody forgot to change an address when they moved, forgot about a pension they had with a prior employer, or simply lost some paperwork at some point. So my last tip has to be get organised and spend the time and energy in keeping yourself up to date. The easiest way possible of doing that is to build a relationship with a good financial advisor who understands your profession and hand that responsibility to them. Give them your statements, give them the details, and then say, this is now on you to make sure that I'm always up to date and on track for my retirement plans. And I would say do that initially, and then make sure that you do that every year as a priority. Put an hour aside every year to sit down with that person and say, tell me where I'm up to and tell me if I'm on track with where I'd like to be at the age I'd like to be there. And there's a really simple reason for saying why clients should do that. A recent study by the International Longevity Centre found that people who used a financial advisor to plan for retirement were on average £47,000 better off than people who didn't. So that's top tip number 5. Get organised and stay there.